All right, hello guys. So today I have one thing I want to make really clear. I am not an endurance coach. What I am is a strength and conditioning coach. And the distinction to me is very important. And today I want to dive into this a little bit and explain what I mean here, what the differences are, and just so you can sort of understand kind of where I'm coming from with some of my training recommendations, where my background is coming from that sort of shapes the sort of philosophies as a coach of what I do, and a few things that I definitely do not do, which you may first consider when it comes to the world of endurance. So endurance training, it's basically, as a definition, it's really any type of sport which involves long duration, continuous exercise. So the traditional endurance sports, running, cycling, swimming, trail running, cross-country skiing, whatever it may be, those long, steady state exercise. And yes, hiking, trekking, backpacking, it falls into this. Because hiking is a long duration event, it's pretty much an endurance sport. And when it comes down to people who typically train hikers and some of the bigger names in the industry, almost all of them are coming from a background in endurance sports. So they've previously been a triathlete, or they've previously been running marathons, or they've previously been a trail runner or a long distance skier, or whatever it may be. And they're coming from that particular world of endurance and transitioning into hiking for whatever reason, and they're helping people from that perspective. But to be really clear, from my perspective, I don't have that background. Yes, I've done plenty of running when I'm younger. Yes, I know about training for these sports. And yes, I've sort of learned about a lot of these things. But I've never been an endurance athlete. I've never been a marathon runner. That's never interested me. I've never been a long distance swimmer. I've never been a triathlete or whatever it may be. The sports I trained for when I was playing sports were shorter, team-based sports. I was a sprinter for quite a while, and those are the things that I actually trained for. And my perspective as a coach, it's not coming from the world of endurance. It's coming from the world of strength and conditioning. And there's a few very different differences. Very different differences. Great wording there, and I'm not going to edit that out just for a laugh. But there's a few key differences between me and an endurance coach, which you may want to be aware of. Now, when it comes to the world of endurance, one of the things that I always see, and it's just a typical thing in all of those sports I mentioned before, is strength is typically used as an afterthought, and strength development is an afterthought, in the sense that people are always focusing on running, cycling, swimming, getting lots and lots of miles, time, kilometers under their belts for those things, and then every once in a while they might do a little strength session here and there. And it's really thought as just a little bonus, a little extra that may give them a little bit of performance, but no one really takes it seriously. No one really puts, a huge amount of effort into it, and no one really puts a huge amount of thought into it either. But for me, I personally believe that strength training is just as important as your cardiovascular development for your hiking preparation. And when it comes to priority, there's your hiking is at the top. Hiking for hiking is the most important thing you can do. But then when we're coming down to our other cardio training, whether it's our pack training, our stair training, our intervals, or whatever it may be, I truly believe that is just as important as the strength training you're going to do for the trail. I don't treat strength as an afterthought because I know it has so many benefits. But the typical endurance approach, it kind of is. So when you're looking at me in my training, you'll see that. And you'll see me talking about strength training all the time. And that's one feature why it makes me very different to an endurance coach. The second thing that makes me very different to a typical endurance coach is I don't expect my hikers to train for huge amounts of time. In fact, unless someone really wants to, or they are genuinely training for a humongous mountain expedition or a huge trail event, it's rare that I will ask a client to do more than one session a week, which is over 60 minutes, and usually it's shorter than that. Now, a lot of hikers come to see me and they've tried their own training programs before, and they've gone out and hiked or ran or swam 3 times a week for 2+ hours. And in my opinion, I just don't have time for that. I don't think anyone can really fit that into their life very easily, and I think it's very unnecessary. The typical approach to endurance is just stack hours on hours of training. And yeah, it can work, but I honestly think it's like throwing mud at a wall. Yeah, and seeing what sticks. You know what? Yeah, it might work, but you can do much better. if you're a bit more precise, a little bit more specific, in my opinion. And in the world of strength and conditioning, and from the things that I've learned and the mentors I've studied under and the education I've come from, in the world of strength and conditioning, we don't have a huge amount of time to develop athletes. Typically, strength and conditioning sessions are fit into someone's week, and they are important, but it's not like we can spend hours and hours and hours. So we need to get the best use at people's times from the limited amount of time they have available. And that's the approach I take, as opposed to saying hours and hours and hours of training. And sometimes hikers coming on board my programs, they're really surprised about how little I get them to do compared to what they were doing previously. Yes, they're still training. Yes, they're still working hard. But if you're specific, you're structured, and you're personalized, you can get a lot done in a very short amount of time as compared to going out and hiking, walking, running, swimming, cycling for hours and hours and hours at a time. So that's another thing that differentiates me from a typical endurance coach. The third thing that makes me a little bit different is I don't believe a warm-up should take 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, or whatever it may be. I see this all the time from endurance coaches. They're like, look, your warm-up, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go out and run for 10 minutes or cycle for 10 minutes. Then you're going to do this 5 minutes of stretching. Then you're going to do 10 minutes of core. Then you're going to do another run, and then you'll be ready to train. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but it's the same type of thing. For me, I don't think that makes sense. Your warm-up should be short, sharp, and specific. Typically, my warm-ups for my hikers, depending on the person, will take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. In the very, very, very longest, it'll be 15 minutes. And that's a rare occasion. But I feel like if you do the right things, are precise with them, you can get warm and ready to roll in a very short amount of time. And I don't think you need to be spending 20 plus minutes warming up. The next thing that differentiates me from a typical endurance coach is I am not a slave to heart rate tracking. Now, I know a lot of people love tracking their heart rate. They love keeping an eye on what's going on. They love their watches, their heart rate monitors, or whatever it may be. And yes, it can be useful, but it's not the be-all, end-all. It's a metric. That's it. And I know endurance coaches love to sort of give particular training zones, get really, really, really obsessive about staying in certain numbers and yada, yada, yada. But for me, most of the time, that's not super necessary. What I like to do with my clients, as opposed to telling them to watch a certain number, is just giving them areas of intensity they want to aim for. If a session is considered easy, ask them to walk at a pace or hike at a pace or run at a pace where they can breathe through their nose or carry a conversation. That's an easy metric. And it saves you a lot of time looking at your watch. If I want someone to go a little bit harder, I'll just ask them, look, at the end of this interval, at the end of this period, I want you to be a bit huffed and puffed and out of breath. Pretty straightforward. And if someone's really doing max intensity, I just tell them to go as hard as they can and they should be pretty knackered by the end. They're the 3 measures of intensity that I typically use, a few others in there, but that does the job. And I'm not saying heart rate tracking is wrong, but it's not needed. And I know a lot of endurance coaches obsess about it, and I don't think it's really worth the time. If you enjoy it, go for it. If you don't, there's much better ways, and that does differentiate me between the two. And then finally, I believe in keeping training metrics simple. Now, if you've ever trained with an endurance coach, you may have gone down this rabbit hole where you're tracking training volume and you're tracking heart rate zones and you're tracking average average numbers. You got like 3 or 4 or 5 different metrics you got to plug into this app or into this spreadsheet or whatever it may be, and it can get really confusing. For me, that stuff makes me go cross-eyed. I just don't have time for it. Yes, again, if you enjoy this stuff, if you enjoy the spreadsheets, if you enjoy the numbers, fair enough, that's absolutely fine, but it's just not necessary unless you enjoy it. Endurance coaches get way too obsessed with this, in my opinion, and I just don't think it's necessary in the world of hiking. Yes, if you're a professional triathlete, yes, if you're doing 20 hours of training a week, you probably do need this a little bit more. But for a typical hiker, backpacker, trekker, mountaineer, it's just not necessary. So there's a few kind of ideas of what differentiates me between a typical endurance coach. I believe strength training is just as important as your typical cardio sessions. I don't expect hikers to dedicate their life to training and spend hours and hours and hours every single week. I believe warm-ups should be short, sharp, and specific. I don't believe that heart rate tracking is the be-all, end-all. And in all honesty, metrics make me go cross-eyed, and I like to keep things much more simple than that. Those are a few of the beliefs around my coaching style and what I believe is the best for hikers out there. It's not the only way of going about it, but it's what I like to do things. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what, Rowan, this is speaking to me. You know what, I'm sick of heart rates, or I want to emphasize strength a bit more, or I just don't have time to spend hours and hours and hours every week just hoping I'm going to get fitter from this long cardio. If you want something a little bit more tailored to you, and you like these ideas I've been talking about, you know, I do want to hear from you. I want to have a chat with you because I really would love to help you with this. If you want to find out more about this approach and how it may help you with On the Trail, this week I am looking for hikers to come get involved in my signature program, which is the Online Summit program. Now, specifically, I'm looking for hikers who want to get strong and pain-free so they can conquer any adventure they set their sights to. If you like what I'm talking about above, and you want to find out more about how this approach may be right for you and how it may help with your goals and your situation, I would love to have a chat. Flick me an email at rowan@summitstrength.com.au with the words "tell me more." That's Rowan, ROWAN, at summitstrength.com.au with the words "tell me more." From there, we can organize a time to chat. We can dive into things and really just see if this is going to be right for you. I'll leave a link in the show notes below with the email. If you do want a bit of a different approach, if you want something a bit more tailored to you, and you don't like the typical endurance training approach, I would love to hear from you once again. So flick me that email and we can take it from there. So thank you very much for listening today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you got a little bit out of it, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a lovely day. Bye.